Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunatu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditam Astu Ma Vidvishavai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we work together with great energy. May our study be illumined. May we not unnecessarily argue with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyoti Gamaya Mrityo Amritam Gamaya. Oh, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. So happy Easter to all of you. As usual, we are continuing the question and answer sessions. So as usual, I'll mute my microphone and receive any questions that you may have.
Because I met someone who told me there are 7 hangers. If you, let's say you take someone you have met that made an impression on you, and then you put, let's say, percentage of how much this person brought me stability, how much made me feel loved, how familiar and similar view you had with me, and that you can see, calculate what did they bring. I mean, for instance, I think it has a bit of sense, but I never heard about seven hangers that you can actually. I mean, it would make sense, but I don't know what you feel with that.
Sorry, can you repeat? Is 7 what? 7? Can you type the word that in text?
It's like 7 points.
7 points.
Yeah. It's what like dividing your connection from a person.
What do you mean by 7 points?
So let's say you have a paper and you write down first family instinct. Second can be generosity. Third, for example, can be, traveling or adventures or discovering. And then fourth can be education. And then I think it depends every person, whatever they feel important, what they look into people.
Okay, I'm not sure if I got your question fully. I'll answer as best I can. I'm not sure why you selected the number 7, but I suppose we all have a list of criteria that we can relate to in terms of how well we can get on with people. Generally, of course, we all want people to be of the highest quality, of the highest value. We all want people to be peaceful, generous, loving, and so on, because every human has got similar needs. So these needs are directly related to our essential nature. Our essential nature is said to be threefold. Our Vedanta philosophy says that which we cannot describe, that which we cannot define, will be pure existence itself. What do we mean by that? We're hankering for some stable anchor in life, some security, some stability, in the midst of things which obviously change, things which are uncertain. You take the world stage, for example, at the moment. You can't predict where the next disruption is going to happen, neither in nature nor in terms of human behavior. But there is a drive, really, to exist, and that drive exhibits itself in a will to exert power, a will to exert your individuality, your nationality. And I think when we meet somebody, some other fellow human being, we do have a list of criteria. Let's take the relational aspect of human beings. We would want somebody that we find compatible in a number of different areas. We seem to have some kind of list like that. Having said that, if we have the right mindset, then we can find compatibility with everybody. Because when we look toward human nature, we have to make sure that we have sufficient penetration of vision to go beyond the physical, to go beyond the energetic, to go beyond the mental and emotional, and to go beyond the intellectual and the cultural, and look towards something that exists and never changes, something that is the author of all the rhythm that we find, of all the gifts and benefits that we explore and enjoy in life. We can call this a root pure consciousness. And we're all looking for joy because the root within is called bliss. Now, of course, in answering these questions, I have to relate it to today. Today meaning Easter. And we can take the event as biblical, historical. We can take the event today as metaphysical. We can take it as I say, theologically. There are a number of ways in which we can take it. But if any event that is celebrated leads us in a meditative way to find our root, once we find our root, all these other questions will go away. They become somewhat superficial. But we have to maybe explore the deeper issues of today, Easter namely, that makes this universal. Interestingly enough, Easter, which is in other places called Pasch or Paschal or Passover, sometimes it's not even called Easter, it's called Resurrection Sunday, because it gets to the point, thus in the Christian tradition. As a Vedantin, we maybe would be more interested to see, is there some universality in this beyond mere theology? And theology should also point the way to universal truth somewhere. It should not be narrow. So in an attempt to see what is the deep value of this, and in doing that, to find the deep value of whatever is lying on the surface, such as relationships, such as compatibilities, such as looking for some criteria, be it 7 or otherwise. Easter, the word, by the way, is derived from oistra. Oistra means is an ancient Germanic goddess, but it comes from the probably anyway, from the Indo-Germanic or Indo-Aryan or Indo-European, depending on the term you like to use. Ushas, meaning dawn. Isn't that interesting? That immediately gives us a clue as to the relevance of today for everybody. Because all these fundamental essences that I've mentioned are not just theoretical, they can be explored and they can be revealed. It can be a revelation, a kind of resurrection of the internal truth that is always there. And so we can see how the symbolism leading up to today is relevant to us in our personal spiritual life and how they can enrich our experience. The events naturally leading up to, let's say, Friday, crucifixion, were unexpected, I think, to Jesus's followers and disciples. There was clearly an expectation that if somebody claims themselves to be a Messiah, there is immediately a spiritual and political, therefore material composition to what was expected of a Messiah. Don't forget, in Jesus' time, the land was occupied by a hated regime. It was tolerated. The dominant conquerors were the Romans, part of a vast empire, largest empire that the ancient world has known. And they certainly had an iron fist on the Jewish people, the people of Jesus' day. And Jesus came from Galilee, which was noted for its rebellious nature. It was also a kind of crossroads between cultures as well. And so I think there's great significance that Jesus and his followers come from Galilee. But on the Passover day, Jews will congregate toward the temple, where they will reenact this rescue from slavery. And part of it was to take animals to be sacrificed in the temple. The incident where Jesus upsets the money changers and what have you, what he was doing was he was making an impact on the commercial center, where money changers made a lot of money because you had to have a certain coin that had to be offered. And so this ritualistic portion was there. And the remarkable thing is that Jesus upsets the tables, but it's not just tables in a market. We can see it as a revolutionary movement. But Jesus also is a spiritual teacher. So the qualification of Messiah is there. And the Romans arrest Jesus and they crucify him, a Roman punishment, a Roman capital punishment. And the charge is quite clearly his claim to royalty, royal dominance. He is the king of the Jews. Such a statement is immediately a challenge to Roman authority, a challenge to Caesar. So naturally, such a person would be arrested. But look at the great disappointment. Your great leader that you had all the hope in, that gave such wonderful spiritual wisdom about the inner nature of your own being, described as the kingdom of heaven, is now humiliated and hangs on a cross like any other common criminal. Probably more so because the charge is a very serious charge, and the Romans had no difficulty in doing it. But the records of this tone this down. They tone it down because when these records were made, when these Gospels were written, it wouldn't have been good to support the Jewish sentiments. Around about 70 AD, there was a revolution, and the Romans came, they destroyed the temple. It wasn't really a popular thing to be Jewish in the Roman Empire or the Greco-Roman world. And if that had gone along, there would have been just the perpetuation of an obscure Jewish sect that would have been unpopular. But something remarkable happened. And it was centered around the event of a resurrection. Because it wasn't the end, according to the Christians. Because once the body was taken down and put in a tomb, archaeologists have a good idea what that tomb would have looked like, and a stone rolled in front, and a kind of table, probably a family tomb, by the looks of it, by the description of the size possibly, where the anointing of the body would have taken place, and wrapped in linen with herbs and spices and preservatives to some extent. And the description that we find, or that we see in the oldest gospel, or was seen to be the oldest gospel, is in Mark's gospel. When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene, because you can't do anything on the Sabbath, that's the Jewish law, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome bought spices so that it might go to anoint Jesus's body. So these are all dedicated women We can imagine how they felt, the motherly aspect of this. Jesus not only had male disciples, he had female disciples too. And we can see how motherly they would have been and how close to Jesus they were. And so it says very early on the first day of the week, just after sunrise, they were on their way to the tomb and they asked each other, who will roll the stone away from the entrance of the tomb? Because, of course, they're women and they require some muscle power. And which was very large, had been rolled away. It had already been rolled away. And in John's Gospel, he says, Jesus answered, they found the tomb was empty. And they entered the tomb. They saw a young man dressed in a white robe sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. Don't be alarmed, he said. You're looking for Jesus the Nazarene, because he came from Nazareth, who was crucified. Well, he has risen. In other words, a new hope for a Messiah, not a failed Messiah. He is not here. See the place where they laid him. But go, tell his disciples and Peter, he is going ahead of you into Galilee, and there you will see him just as he told you. And there were many sightings from there on. Now, the Apostle Paul had never met Jesus. He was considerably younger than Jesus. Well, a little bit. He'd never met Jesus, but he'd met Christians. And the Acts of the Apostles tell us how he would have stood by and endorsed the persecution of an upstart Jewish sect that would have seemed to be heretical. But on the way to Damascus, it is told, he had this vision, he was struck down, and he met this risen Christ. And if it had not have been for that event, the rest of Christianity as a separate religion would not have taken place. It was St. Paul and others who would have driven that in the Greco-Roman world. That means that Jesus, the Jewish Messiah, now becomes part of a universal religion, after some struggle, no doubt, on the part of Paul to persuade the elders in Jerusalem that what this Jesus taught was actually a universal thing that should be taught to everybody everywhere. Now, theology, of course, gives this a unique event, a unique mark. But the Vedanta would be happy to accept the Vaishnavite philosophy that, and necessarily because the Bhagavad Gita is part of that, that this cosmic balancing power would come from age to age whenever it's necessary and make the necessary adjustments everywhere. And so it is seen that giant waves come and leave their impact for thousands of years, all coming from the Logos, the cosmic mind. And this comes out, of course, in John's Gospel in the prologue. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And so we now go to the philosophical. That means also the mystical. The philosophical, Logos, cosmic mind. But let's now go to the mystical. The mystical means let's make a closer connection with this. The closer connection is to do with this dawn, this ushas, because the dawn is a symbol of new hope. And when you connect it with spring, new hope. And I think it is a German custom that the egg represents naturally new birth, new spring. And it is remarkable that creation in Hinduism, for example, is seen to be something from an egg. And the egg parts, makes two divisions and so on. There is a thought that in ancient Vedic cosmology that the spheroid, which is like an egg, is because there was an eruption from this logos, from this cosmic mind that we call Brahma, And this Brahma himself comes and creates a circular movement or an ecliptical movement. It starts moving, and its movement is like water. You take a drop of water and you spin it in a circular fashion or in an elliptical fashion, and it spreads out and becomes a spheroid. And then from that spheroid, other things come, and so on and so forth. So maybe we are living in a cosmological model that is rotational. Now, there are some suggestions that that might be the case when we reevaluate this expansion of the universe or expansion of space and see that actually it's not expanding more rapidly, it's expanding more rapidly only in one direction and less in another. And that suggests an axis somewhere. It's only a suggestion. There's no evidence for it beyond that. And certainly it hasn't become anything like a solid theory. But who knows, after some time, we may understand that this egg-like structure is the structure of our universe. That's a little beside the point. When I was small, of course, or even children today actually will be hunting as we speak for chocolate Easter eggs hidden in the garden, a kind of fun thing. And of course, there's always a commercial aspect to these things because some children may not understand the significance of this and what they are doing and why they're doing it. But there would be an inherent sense. Why egg, and something comes out of an egg, new life comes out of an egg. And in this same way, this risen Christ becomes a focus of the attention of Christianity, without which there is no Christianity. This is the single central event that makes this event the single most important and significant event in Christianity. More so than Christmas or any other festival and celebration. And of course, it also follows this Paschal routine, and it has to be said that depending on whether you follow the Gregorian calendar or the Justinian calendar, then some people will be celebrating this differently at a different time. And there was a great debate really as to when things would be properly established or when the date would have been entrenched. I know Ireland had its own point of view on it and created some controversy. So we have to now look beyond the gospel accounts, and then we now have to look at letters written by St. Paul, the great champion, the great missionary, really, of the whole Christian movement. And it's a lesson for us in Vedanta also, because Vedanta is also the rediscovery of an ancient philosophy, of an ancient truth that is significant for the whole world. And will Vedanta be a world religion? Will it be the world religion? Swami Vivekananda asked this question. And if the answer is yes, then it means a huge missionary endeavor of the proportion of early Christianity has to be undertaken. Not because we want to force anything, but because we want people to explore and discover their own inherent freedom in a more accelerated way. Why not? Why not shout this message from the rooftops? Was Swami Vivekananda's point of view? Why keep it secret? Why keep it hidden? Why make it esoteric? And this new dawn has now arisen to us. This new dawn came. Many people would trace, in terms of the Vedantic movement, this new age back to Sri Ramakrishna, who is seen to be also something like this cosmic balancing power coming for this day and age. And the St. Paul version would be Swami Vivekananda spreading this message everywhere. And not only that, but our own Irish lady, Sister Nivedita, a great saintly woman, carrying on Vivekananda's message beyond 1904 or beyond the time when Swami Vivekananda got his Mahasamadhi, and spreading it more and more and more. That's the significance also of Sister Nivedita, because Sister Nivedita, while her sentiment and heart was entirely Indian, was not only Westerner but Irish. Above all your Celtic blood, that was how Swami Vivekananda valued her. Not just their immense love, not just being well educated, not only being sincere to the backbone and other things, but above all, this Celtic blood, this internal feistiness to think differently, to be individual, to have a missionary spirit, to have a level of feistiness and strength, something like that of a lioness. And we all have to have that, having explored it for ourselves. You can't go and spread it elsewhere if you haven't understood it for yourself. St. Paul cannot be an effective missionary having suffered many, many traumas, difficulties, persecutions, arrests, beatings, and still prepared to go on, ultimately being beheaded in Rome, probably by Nero. So if it hadn't been for this transformation that he undertook, this mystical transformation that opened his eyes completely, that changed his life, something no doubt he was looking for, preparing for, this internal mystic revelation, if it hadn't been for that, then the whole of Christianity would not have developed, and it would not have encompassed and embraced ultimately the whole of the known world at that time in terms of Western understanding and culture. So our Vedantic movement will have to be of the same kind. We will have to discover this new ushas, this new dawn within us first. And then we can automatically spread the light of our understanding and knowledge and wisdom everywhere. We won't have to do it with any effort. It's not that we have to preach. That's our job. It's not that we have to do that. It's just that we have to be a shining example of truth and goodness and harmony and love. What can we do in the world? There's not much. At the moment, a war is raging, actually more than one, but highlighted in the news is one in particular that threatens to have serious consequences everywhere, potentially. Is there something we can do? Well, you see, people are collecting money here and there. Refugees are being looked after. Yes, from a humanitarian point of view, we can do something. But what is more enriching and important is if we see the divinity in everyone, and if we ourselves become a shining example of that light, not only within us, but also spread everywhere, that being the case, we will make a transformation, just as St. Paul had a transformation made. And just as Jesus, standing on a mountain, goes through a transfiguration, just as Ramakrishna on Kalpataru Day has a transformation, shows themselves for who they are. We have access to that ourselves. That is the importance and significance of the Vedanta philosophy. It is a reenactment of this Easter, where knowledge dawns on us. Not only does it dawn on us, but it reveals also the truth, something that is eternal, something that is profound, something that shines everywhere, something whose light is completely brilliant. So I don't know how relevant that is to your question, but it puts all these criteria of human contacts in a different context, because whoever we meet will be a kind of ray. Now, if you mention the number 7, well, there are 7 colors in the rainbow. You can't say one color is better than the other. All are necessary. All are split up light through a kind of prismatic spectrum. In other words, according to their wavelength. So all of us will encounter people and places and events as well that are condensations of our own thought, largely speaking. So the way we reform our thought, the way we view life, the way we have a vision of another person, our behavior will change accordingly. And when our behavior changes accordingly, the world is a better place. Our own world is a better place. The world around us is a better place. And if we take things in a cosmic way, we can't say that an incident happening miles and miles away from us is not affected. There has to be a conviction in this new way of thinking of a holistic version of the universe. Whatever we think here, whatever we do here, has repercussions everywhere. What in modern scientific speak is termed the butterfly effect. A butterfly flaps its wings somewhere in the Amazon forest, and you can't help it because there's a connectedness everywhere. Ultimately, we see it at the other end of the spectrum. Just like if you have a pond, because life is finite, so if you have a pond and you dabble your fingers at one end, it doesn't matter how far away you go, the ripple will have its effect. It'll move other bodies of water, other bodies of water. And if we think in a concentrated and systematic way, it has a large wave-like effect. For example, if you're standing on a very quiet beach, let's say in Ireland, Portmarnock Beach is very quiet. The sand is so shallow, makes the ocean so shallow. I often joke, actually, you would probably walk across from Portmarnock Beach to Wales. I don't know. I doubt it, but it feels like that. But then all you have to do is a ferry has to go past, and big waves will come onto the shore. And the ferry may be quite a few miles away. So we are all connected. What we make of the connections is the most important. Not how the connection arose or what is the quality of the connection. The connectedness is already there. And we have to make use of whatever we find, all the raw materials that we find in front of us. We have to learn to transform it by a transformational way of thinking of it differently, valuing it differently. Ultimately, our final point of analysis is a feeling, a profound feeling where real connectedness occurs. Lord, you are there, standing behind, with a face, with eyes, there's no doubt, with the capacity to express yourself, your consciousness, through speech, through opinions, through evaluations, through poetry, through song. The capacity to tune in to other vibrations, where the whole of nature, coming from cosmic mind downwards, combines and recombines in wavelengths and frequencies that we can tune into. So, with all of these thoughts, I think that I may have said enough, and I leave opportunity for to see whether, in fact, I didn't really fully understand your question because I can't hear properly what you were saying. And so if I didn't answer your question, maybe you could continue with it.
Thank you, Swamiji. It was someone who told me like 2 days ago, so I don't really know why he chose 7. I also thought the same when he said it, but he was a bit optimistic, so...
Yes, there's no doubt that there's a significance about the number 7, a mathematical significance, it seems, in the structure of the universe. There's a significance to 3. The 3 times 3 times 3 is 9, but the significance is that the whole universe can be described in this way because what we call nature is comprised of 3 varying components, and we call this Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. And And then the second thing is that our whole range of experience is in waking, dream, and dreamless sleep. And then at the level of this creative impulse that religion calls God, we have this creation, we have this sustaining and preservation, and we have this dissolution, and all of them can be related to these three components, sattva, rajas, and tamas. So 3 and 3 and 3, 9, will describe the whole of our experience. And separate to that, as it were, seemingly, is an entity that can witness that. So, but then the 7 notes on a piano, 7 musical notes, whether they are of the Oriental variety, the Western variety of music. There are 7 days of the week, there's a sabbatical, and all the rest of it. So there seems to be some mathematical significance to number 7, there's no doubt, and also to the compound of the number 3. Yeah.
I've got two observations actually, well, kind of 2 questions. I would say the first one, which is related to all the festivities within like Easter and Christianity, I mean Catholicism. My family was very Christian. I am the first one who actually stepped out and said, I think things are differently. So the way I look at religions, I feel like if it works for you, in the way that you connect and that you have your faith and you live a happy life, that's completely fine. It's for me a bit difficult when it comes into, for example, let's say celebrations of confirmation in Christianity. Like, for example, my family celebrates. Because nowadays I realize when you go into a church, at least in my country, what they go after is actually the money they get out from there. So for me, the way it hurts me. It hurts me, it doesn't hurt me. In the way that I see nowadays, faith has been taken from people in monetary ways. But I think it's different. I think, I wouldn't even define it as religion. This is internal. It's internal. There's a union, So for me, that's a bit harsh for a side. And then the second will be, what do you think is the best way to look at the situation of forgiving yourself for allowing an injustice as a, let's say, behavior from others to you, which you were ignoring in that moment, you couldn't speak up, which is very hard. It's one of the things that are more difficult. So you could give a little talk, Sergey, please.
Yes, so all religions have at least two dimensions to them. One we can call the eternal part that never changes, the fundamental truth. That is why religion has come out. So if you take anthropologically the explanation for why is there religion, there may be some different theories. One theory might be we have to explain all the forces of nature. Something must be moving it. What is that? And that can result in a certain polytheism. And that can be brought into one central force that is called monotheism. Another one may be we have to explain what happens when the human body dies, and we have to see, will there be some surviving element? And that component of religion is called animism or spiritism. And maybe that's the origin of religion. But I think there's a higher origin of religion. And that higher origin of the religion will be this introspective analysis that gives us the experience of oneness. This certainly was the case with the ancient rishis that gave rise to the Vedanta. So this is called the eternal side of religion. Then there is that component which goes from age to age, that changes according to time and according to custom. It's like a river that flows, it's the same river, but over time it will have to change this direction here and there to make it more contemporary. And many, many world religions today are suffering from this adjustment or this necessity to adjustment and perhaps this unwillingness to adjust. And I think the more liberal religions that are more like league of religions that allow tremendous flexibility will be the least ones to suffer from trying to make adjustments to doctrine, dogma, and theology. This is, I think, why religion has had a decline in countries that were highly, highly Roman Catholic, such as Spain, or highly, highly Orthodox, such as Greece, Cyprus, and so on, or throughout the whole of Europe, where maybe only 30% or so, it's estimated, are church-going people, say. And part of that is this reluctance to change, this difficulty in changing, this difficulty to adjust to new things, new values, modern concepts. And another part of that would be the secular values have come up and portray themselves as being the norm. And if you hold on to the old values, then you're seen to be at odds with it. And if you compromise, then you're seen to be flaky. But you bypass all of that problem by going down to the fundamentals. That is why the most beautiful statement to do with religion is Swami Vivekananda's statement. Each soul is potentially divine. The goal is to manifest that from within. Controlling nature, internal and external. Do it by work or worship or psychic control or philosophy, one or more, all of these, and be free. And then temples, churches, see, books, rituals, dogmas, doctrines are but secondary details. It's not that they're unimportant. They provide a structure. But the structure has to change when a maturity comes in, just as the structure of childhood has to be changed as you mature, just as the structure of education has to change as you become more mature, just as the structure of physicality will change as you grow older. So too, your understanding of these profound things cannot remain stagnant, and they have to change. And now it becomes an internal exploration that you undertake. You go into the inner worlds to find out what is the truth and to go dive into your own inner depths. So that's the first part. Second part about forgiveness. You see in the Abrahamic world, and even you see the idea of the preceding Passion Week and Holy Week and so on, that the idea that somebody sheds their lifeblood for you, misunderstood as having a salvific value which is unique and which gives you a dependency, would be really, really bad theology. Because it gives you guilt, it gives you shame, it gives you from, it gives you, sorry, I'm just reading your text, I'll deal with that now. It gives you a starting point of defectiveness. But Vedanta says something different, and Easter says something different. If you take it in a more mystical way, in a more metaphysical way, then the glory that you are discovering is a risen glory from within. It's a resurrection of your own inner self. You can take it like that. If you take it like that, symbolically, something like the rising sun. The rising sun wasn't, it didn't come out of darkness, it overcame darkness. That's the significant difference. So forgiving yourself means a requirement to go back into your past history and bring up things which you feel guilty about. Then you have to forgive yourself. Now, forgiving yourself could be something done in the present moment, of course. Having brought up an incident from the past, what will you do? But you see, forgiving not on the basis of what a pity, but on the basis of what a glory. There's the difference. What a glory. This next second, this next moment is giving me the opportunity to put something glorious in, to shine, to connect with my own inner nature and that of others, and bring out this connectedness. And the connectedness will have a transformation because we all have a past history. We all have a history of which we're not necessarily proud of. But we also have a basis. And the basis is like this. You see, if you talk of religion, there was a conversation with a famous Shankaracharya, and he was approached by a Christian, and the Christian said, "Oh, I want to be converted to Hinduism." And the Shankaracharya said, "This is not possible. We don't convert anybody from another religion into Hinduism. We don't have a process like that because you're already a Hindu. You just don't know it." And then through various arguments, he came to the conclusion, do you think that when you were born into a certain religion, God didn't know what he was doing? He knew. And the final part of the conversation was, don't try and convert to another religion. Use what you have and find somebody in your own tradition who is a realized soul. And by their saintliness, they will guide you. And the man goes away saying, I never thought that you would convert me back to my own religion. So this is the very, very essence of the Vedanta. There's nothing wrong with your past, because your past contains many ups and downs. Swami Vivekananda's language for it is a vast gymnasium. Sometimes you'll fall off, of course, and hurt yourself, but you'll get on the gymnasium horse, as it were, and continue. And you do it with courage, you do it with strength, you do it with conviction, faith, and you do it with joy. A joyous journey. So self-forgiveness, that whole subject is a little tricky, because forgive and forget, well, forgiveness is one thing, but to forget is another. And if you don't forget, you can't forgive yourself or others, by the way. Let me just see, there's a question here in chat. Is it normal to start to crave isolation on our spiritual path? Yes, the answer is yes. To be more, let me clarify what isolation means. Going into solitude and silence more and more. Not necessarily being antisocial. There's a difference. And to be more with nature. Nature, what is nature? You're part of nature, but yes, I understand what you're saying. In other words, being attuned more to beauty and goodness, an environment conducive to spiritual awakening. That's why we have retreats in good places. To be more with nature, the deeper the relationship goes with our deity, the less appealing worldliness becomes. This is true, absolutely true. In fact, it's a commensurate business. That the more we are attached to God, the more that we gravitate toward that, the less worldliness has a value for us. This desire to retreat, should we listen to this? Yes. And perhaps live for some time away from the hustle and bustle? Yes. Or should we remain and practice more dispassion? You see, this is why we go along with the dictum or the recommendation from Ramakrishna. From time to time, go into solitude. That's why we have a retreat. Our next retreat, of course, is the first weekend of June. And it's a silent retreat. It gives everybody the opportunity to go into solitude and be a part of nature as we understand it, an environment of beauty where we have trees and flowers and fields and woods and so on. And rivers also, by the way. But what about this other side of things, dispassion? Yes, you see, we can't avoid interacting with others, nor should we. It's part of our daily life. No matter how much you want to retreat, you will always have to be interacting for the large part. All right, I think then we can leave it at that. Yes, because it's nearly our time up, 11:28. Peace. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.